We should be recording now. So welcome, Jameela or Dr. Conway-Turner. We're obviously so excited to have you as part of the AltAc series, and to have you talk to us a little bit about what it's like to have a postdoc position, particularly a policy postdoc, which we haven't really talked about before, what it's like to work at a place like AIR and help us define what those spaces look like a little bit. And then to talk to us really about what it's like to do research, particularly in spaces that are predominantly doing criminal justice research without a strict or traditional criminal justice background. So we're really, really excited to have you and to talk with us. And I think you might actually be the first speaker who doesn't have a strict criminology background. So kind of to get us started, to help us dig into who you are and what you're doing now, can you give us a little bit of information about what you studied and what you focused on in your PhD program?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got my PhD at George Mason University, and I studied applied developmental psychology. So it was all about child development and, learning kind of what is the general trajectory, the normal trajectory of children and youth, adolescents, and early adulthood, and talking about kind of what are the factors that can kind of influence development over time and what kind of leads to more positive outcomes, what leads to more negative outcomes. So we did talk a little bit about juvenile justice, and we had some speakers that would come and talk a little bit about, what the pathway is like for youth who kind of come in contact with the justice system, as well as, we definitely talk about kind of the school to prison pipeline as well, but really kind of much more focused on the school side
Mhm.
and kind of what schools can do and what they are doing that kind of lead to that kind of pipeline and what they can do to kind of be preventative, to try to keep that from happening. And so I always kind of had a little bit of an interest in this area, even though it, wasn't really what I studied, which was, more about social emotional development, school practices, school discipline, those types of things. Um, and I kind of got into it a little bit more during my policy fellowship.
Mhm.
And then been at being AIR, we have a criminal justice, juvenile justice area,
Mhm.
which is growing more. But so since I've been here, I've been able to work on some of those projects as well. And I think it has been very welcomed to have someone with a developmental kind of background as opposed to a criminology background. And I feel like they really kind of pair well
Mhm.
together, to talk with people who have kind of the more criminology training, and then to me to kind of talk about kind of from a developmental lens, like what's happening for these adolescents and why, things might be happening the way that they're happening. And so that's
Absolutely.
been really interesting.
Okay, so I have to settle myself because all of the follow-up questions are kind of coming at me all at once. So, okay, so first, before you got to
Can you guys
AIR,
hear me? It looks like you
can you hear me?
froze.
Yep. Before you got to AIR, you worked as a policy fellow for the Society for Research and Child Development at NIJ. So, can you talk to us a little bit before you kind of get into what that fellowship was and what you did with it? Can you talk to us about why you chose a postdoc position out the gate anyway, and why you chose a policy postdoc position specifically?
Yep, that makes sense. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I always kind of knew that I didn't want to go the academic route.
Mhm.
But as a grad student, I was kind of really unsure like what I would actually do after graduate school. I had a really cool opportunity to work as an intern, at a place called Child Trends, which is another research organization like AIR. So I got a little bit of a, um, I guess, entry point into non-academic research. But I took this class when I was a graduate student called Child Development and Public Policy,
Mhm.
and it was taught by someone who had done the fellowship program before. And so, she talked about it, and I was like, that sounds great. I really want to do it. And so, like, that's really how I got into it. I just kind of heard about it. And so what it is that they take people who have PhDs
Mhm.
and they place you in either the executive branch or the congressional branch to work on issues related to um, research policy and practice. And, I did think a little bit about doing a postdoc, like a more research,
Mhm.
traditional kind of postdoc afterwards. Um, but, you have to be really intentional about finding a postdoc that's like not just an extension of the skills that you learned in
Mhm.
graduate school. So oftentimes it's, you're directing a research lab or you're doing more data collection. I mean, it's really helping you to hone those skills of leading research projects. Um, but it's not really giving you a lot of other kinds of skills that you might learn in other positions, with the exception of some postdocs. So
Mhm.
I have a friend right now who has a postdoc at University of Maryland, but they work as an external evaluator for an early childhood program. And so what she's doing is very different than
Mhm.
what people often do, because she has to, really learn how to do research in more of an applied way for this early childhood program and communicate to the staff and the leadership of that program. So she's getting a lot of the skills that I feel like I learned in my policy fellowship, but it's a little bit different than a traditional postdoc. And so I didn't apply to any postdocs because I really thought that they were all much more research focused. And I think
Sure.
that there are some out there that are more unique, but you probably have to really look for them to find those kinds of opportunities. And I really wanted to learn, how to communicate to people who don't have a research background, or, how to write differently, how to connect research and policy, and like what that is all about. And those are typically skills that you don't learn in a research postdoc.
So thinking about that, then it sounds like the conversation, right, is connecting policy and research is a skill that happens in a policy or an alternative style postdoc. Thinking about the writing, which we know is characteristically different than academic
Mhm,
writing or publishing writing or technical white paper report writing.
mhm.
But so thinking about those skills, right? Do you think that those skills transcend topic area? So you were doing you specialize in social and emotional learning and child development, but you were doing that at NIJ, which is a very traditional justice space. So
Mhm.
are these skills things that you see are specific to a place like NIJ, or are really specific or transcend kind of policy spaces and topic areas?
I think they transcend policy spaces and topic areas. I do think that I had a very unique experience at NIJ because they at the time were, they had the comprehensive school safety initiative, which was like much more school
Mhm.
based in this area at NIJ where they like really traditionally only do much more specific to criminology kind of research.
That's right.
And so I think it was a unique opportunity that probably, is not always present at NIJ. But I do think that those skills it doesn't matter what the content area is or specifically where you are in an alternative space, that those are the skills that you kind of need and will learn at any of those places.
Well, so that's something that we've kind of talked a little bit in this series about, and with students, we have some students, most of the students that participate and join us are coming from traditional criminology backgrounds like Kate and myself. But they're interested in justice spaces or, criminal legal spaces, but also interested in what it would look like to maybe maneuver to other spaces, right? If they wanted to move into education policy, but with a crim background, or wanted to move into public health policy, but with a crim background. Is there, given that you did something similar where you went from a different place and came to a justice space, are there really skills or are there like skills or ideas that it doesn't matter where you go, that they work in all of these spaces regardless?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that having a desire and want to collaborate and be more interdisciplinary is probably the only thing that I would say is necessary. I also will say that at research organizations, this is kind of getting a little bit to like what it's like to be at AIR, but at these research organizations, it operates very differently than at a university, where I feel like at a university, you have a discipline that you know, and that's your like expertise, and you have to work hard to collaborate with other people. And at AIR, it's like much more fluid. And so all of our project teams have people from different backgrounds. And even the people who work in education may have a sociology background or, a psychology background, or we have somebody who has a law degree. And when she was working as a lawyer, she worked with school districts. So like it makes a little bit more sense in terms of the connection. But your background isn't really what is the most important and what your expertise is. It's more like, what are your interests? What are the things that you want to do? And who is it that you want to collaborate with? Because everything is collaborative and most of what we do is interdisciplinary.
Mm-hmm.
And so, our projects really have people with a lot of different backgrounds on them. So it's a lot easier to kind of pursue other content area interests at a place like AIR. Whereas I feel like as a faculty member, it's oftentimes, it's a little bit harder and you have to like really forge that path because it's not natural
Mm-hmm.
to do that. It's really natural to kind of stay in your lane. And even if you partner or collaborate with another person, like you both stay in your lanes and like communicate with each other. And I feel like that's a very different kind of dynamic than what we have at AIR.
I think, okay, so we're going to get into AR here in a second, but I guess I hadn't really thought of it that way, but I think it certainly makes sense that in traditional university settings, even if you're building a bridge with a faculty member in a different department, let's say, or who does something characteristically different, which is why you're asking them to join you, it's almost as though you're giving them responsibility for that part and not taking responsibility for that part, as opposed to really finding a way to create, this like really messy jambalaya of sorts, right? Like it otherwise kind of looks like a plate that's like, the broccoli's over here and the chicken's over here. We're on the same plate, but we're not necessarily mixing the same way. I hadn't really thought about that. And that certainly, I think that makes sense. So thinking about AIR, so AIR stands for American Institute of Research. And so before we kind of dig into the work that you do there, we always have folks kind of define their space, right? So how does your agency consider themselves? So does AR consider itself a research firm, a think tank, a nonprofit? It could be some of those things, all of those things. So, and then kind of overall, before we get deep into what you guys do there, kind of overall, what is kind of the work that you guys do?
Yeah, that makes sense. So we define as a nonprofit research organization that we conduct social science research. So it's very broad. I mean, we just say social science research. And our part of our mission is like creating evidence that helps create a better, more equitable world. So we do a lot of research. We also do some technical assistance work as well. But I think that that's kind of like really how we define ourselves. We are heavily an education
Mhm.
organization. I think when it was founded, that was the majority of what we did. And so most of our projects, I would say, are education focused and also funded by the Department of Education and, from that kind of area. But we do also have areas in criminal justice and juvenile justice and youth development, health, workforce, early childhood. So like there's a lot. I mean, there's a pretty big umbrella under this like social science category that we would put ourselves in. And we also have an international area as well. That's pretty small,
Mhm.
but we do have an international area.
So when you're thinking about kind of building evidence at AIR, I mean, so let me go back by saying it's social science, but with more of like a lean towards education, social science, compared to a space, let's say maybe like Vera or Urban, where very similar places as AIR, but a lean towards more justice with education involved in some of the projects or some of the departments that they have. So similar, so heavily on education, building evidence as part of the mission. What does evidence look like there? So what is research at AR? Is it all qualitative, all quantitative? Is it mixed? Is it primary data collection, secondary only? Is it evaluation work specifically? Like what does building evidence look like there? Did I freeze? Did she freeze?
I can hear you, Shanna. I think it might be Dr. Conway-Turner's end.
All right, we'll give her a sec. Oh, there you are.
Sorry about that. My Zoom crashed. I don't know.
Oh, you're
I
good.
don't know what happened.
Well, you looked lovely in your frozen crash face.
Oh.
You were just very kind. Usually when I freeze on Zoom, it's in a very unflattering face. So we were just asking, what does research and building evidence look like there? So if it's a mission is to build evidence for fair and equitable world, is that qualitative, quantitative, mix, primary, secondary, only evaluation work? Like what does it look like to build evidence?
It's all of that. So we do what we consider to be client-centered research.
Mhm.
So that means that schools, youth programs, state governments, any organization that you can kind of think of that they have an idea of what it is that they want to do. It may be an evaluation of a program. It may be training for their staff. It could be trying to, understand, what's happened, like the school to prison pipeline in their schools. They have an idea for what it is that they want to do. They reach out. One way is that they can reach out with what's called a request for proposals. So they say, we need this done by someone. They write up all of the things that they want. They post it. Organizations like AIR, university, faculty members at universities, other people, they read that. They say, I have a good plan for how I want to do that. And then you write it up, you submit it, and then they choose someone to do that work. So that's one way. Still very client-centered. They're saying this is what we need. We need someone to do that. Another way is that an organization may come to us and say, we need help with those same problems, evaluation work, training work, just basic research kind of work. But we can't fund you to do it. So then we will partner with them to go after a grant, from a federal grant usually, or it could be foundation that is usually topic based. And so we'll go after a grant to get money to do that. Still, again, client centered, because they said, this is what we need. This is what we want to do. Can you help us do that? And then we will go after that. It is quantitative and qualitative, often mixed methods. So we're often doing, some sort of data collection or looking at administrative data, maybe doing interviews, focus groups. But we do a lot of evaluation work because that's a lot of what organizations want. They want to know if their program that they are running is working. And so it is probably primarily evaluation kind of work. Although we do a lot of kind of technical assistance, as I said, as well. And so we do a lot of work to kind of help programs with their implementation, or help programs with their training, or help them, better understand a topic so that they can do their jobs better. But it is not, I don't have an idea that I say that I really want to do and then I execute it. It is the ideas and the projects that we have are really coming from our clients. They're coming from the practitioners. They're coming from, school leaders, or they're coming from program staff, program directors who are saying, this is what we need and how can we help them do it?
Okay, so that makes me, I have some follow-up questions about kind of the funding process that you
Sure.
guys use. But before I get into that, my thoughts as you were describing is that, right, like they're either you're going after grants, or you're partnering with folks for grants, or you're providing TA, right? Those kinds of things. Effectively, you guys are the experts, which is why you're going after the money, or they're coming to you to partner to go get money together. And while that means that you're client-centered, right? You're still the experts in the room. So given that, how much room is there for, Jameela, the researcher, to infuse your own ideas into the work, or ask your own questions, or develop the methodology that's also of interest to you too? Or is it very strict client-centric only?
So half of it is really on me to decide, because what they say is, we want an evaluation of this program, but they don't say usually what kind of like, how is that going to be done? What type of methodology should we use? They kind of say, this is what we want, and then we have to come up with the methodology to make a convincing case for them that this is how it should be done. So all of that is based off of our expertise and what we think, do we need to do an RCT in this situation? Should we collect some interview data? Those are all questions that we decide and that we come up with to figure out what the best plan is. But there was something that you said that my own questions. There's not a lot of room for my own questions. I may have, if a client comes to us, less if there's an RFP, but if a client just comes to us and says, we can't fund you to do this, but we need help with this evaluation, then I can, ask questions that really help them hone and like figure out what good research questions are, and what they should be looking at in order to come up with the answer to the questions that they have. But it's not really about my own, I guess, musings about it. It's kind of it's not purely my own. Like, it may be a curiosity that I have based off of what they say that they want.
Sure.
But there's not a lot of room for, I want to add on this question just because I think it's interesting, unless it's going to further whatever it is that their end goal is. Does that make sense?
Totally. It sounds like they have an idea of, there's a bottom line of what they need done. And you certainly, based upon what they need done, might have questions that are interesting. and that will further what the bottom line. But it's not a matter of like, well, while we're here, let me also ask a couple other things. Like that's not necessarily gonna happen.
Right. Sometimes they may want that. They may want that actually. And so this is like very different from anything I had ever done before. There's a process of working with them to figure out what it is that they want, what it is that bottom line is, what it is that they need, what are their goals, how can we develop research questions that are going to answer that. And so that's a lot of the work that we do, is like working with them to figure out, what is your logic model for this program, and how can we map on the research questions to your logic model so that we can know what it is that we need to study, so we can know what the outcomes are, so that we can know what kind of research design makes sense in order for us to go together to get the grant money to do this project that they want.
It sounds like that, just to me, that exemplifies what applied research is, right?
Yes.
That it is about this client facing, whether it's, it sounds like maybe a community program, or a school, either way, that it's really about answering a bottom line that they have. Like that's part of what makes it so applied. And the participatory action portion is you also walking them through what the questions they need to ask, because a lot of times they don't know what they
don't know.
They don't know what they need to know. And they're not quite sure how to do it. And that's the participatory action part of this research. And the applied work is really about centering their needs and their bottom line to do it together. And I think that's such a good example of what this world looks like all the time, where you can start adding some of your own questions that makes sense for the bottom line. But the way you do that is to be really good at, when you're telling them what they need to know, that sometimes maybe you're also telling them the things that you want to know, and what we don't know as a field about that, right? So while we're here, let's also ask these questions, because you've now presented an opportunity to collect information on something we don't know about. And I think I think being good and learning how to do that early, I think for students would probably make them very, would translate really well. I know I do a lot of those conversations too.
For sure. But I don't think that there are opportunities to practice that in academia. I feel like it was a skill that I'm still learning.
Sure.
And I couldn't work on until I got here. And so I think, there are some things that you're not going to know how to do before you get a job like this, but that doesn't mean you can't do it.
Sure.
It just means that you have to practice, and learn on the job while you're doing it.
That's right. So thinking about kind of the specific work that you guys are doing, can you talk to us maybe about a project that you're really proud of that you've worked on, or something that you're working on right now?
Sure. So I'll say that we work on several projects at a time, that I am never working on one project at once. And I think that there are a lot of reasons for that, which I can get into if you guys are interested. But I think it's always juggling lots of things and lots of roles. And one project I'm doing quantitative analysis, and another project I'm doing a training for school districts. So it's balancing and figuring out, what it is that I need to do, and kind of switching hats and roles a lot.
Sure.
On projects, and everything is team-based. And so nothing that I'm doing is on my own. We have project team meetings and meetings to check in and figure out how things are going and come up with different ideas and things like that. So I think there's two projects that I will highlight. One project I've been on since I got here at AIR. So I've been here for 3.5 years. It is funded by the Department of Education. It's a 5-year project, and it's called REL Midwest, or the Regional Educational Laboratory Midwest. It's a long name.
It's a long name, yeah.
But the Department of Education funds these RELs to do research and technical assistance work in regions of the country. So
Mhm.
every state in the country, including Hawaii and Alaska, are under a regional REL that they can get research and technical assistance work for free. It's free services for them because the Department of Education pays us directly to give this service to them. And so what we do is that we work with our partners in the Midwest region to figure out what research projects they need, what kind of technical assistance they need, and we do that work. But the reason why I like it is that it's all about kind of getting research into the hands of people who need it and also helping them implement those strategies. And we do a lot of dissemination work. So in addition to our research projects that we do, we write a lot of blogs, we produce a lot of infographics, we produce a lot of videos that sometimes they're explaining the research that we have done and what the findings are. Sometimes they're, giving best practices. And so we did, for example, a video, one of our first videos was looking at 3 different practices that we found from a literature review and showing what they look like in practice in a school. And so we did interviews and we kind of looked and showed videos of what those practices were. And then we showed it in a video format. We also did a webinar in December that was on creating inclusive environments for Black teachers. So it was about like recruitment and retention of Black teachers in schools. And so we did a webinar, we did a video that talks about the strategies that we know that work, the best practices. And so it's all about kind of communicating what we know to help educators really implement their different practices to improve student outcomes.
Well, I may have been sleuthing on the internet a little bit. And I really like the series. I think the AI does called Long Story Short.
Oh yeah.
I think that that's so fun. And I was like, wait, I want to do that. I might steal that and bring that to JSP or some version of that, where you're doing these videos. And so I think that your comment, one of the questions I had written down is like, what do your primary deliverables look like? And you've kind of explained that they are anything. They could be a technical report to a site. They could be vlogs. They could be videos. They could be infographics.
Sure.
Did you feel like you had to know how to do that stuff before you got to AIR, or did you already have experience with that, or how did that work? Kind of producing?
I did not have experience.
Okay.
I had known of its importance and really wanting to work on those skills before I got to AIR.
Sure.
But I did not have any experience with infographics or blogs or videos. I had done a little bit of writing for non-academic audiences, but not very much, just a little bit here and there. And when I first got to AIR and I got on this REL project and I was reviewing like an infographic and I just felt like I don't know how to do this. Like I've never done this before. But I actually feel like we do know a lot about topics, and I think we have everything we need to be able to review and create those kinds of products. I think it's just not our comfort zone to do that. But I don't feel like it's a huge stretch for me to do it. And I'm not the one editing the video. Like we have a whole team of people that are on the production side of the videos. And, I provide my review on the content of the video and kind of look and we'll watch the videos and look at it from a whole and say, like, does this tell the story that we want for educators? Is the information that we're presenting correct? And, it's more those types of things that I'm looking at versus like, I'm not in charge of creating the video. That I can't do. I'm not the graphic designer creating the infographic, but I do work on the content for it.
Sure.
And so it's all about kind of knowing what your content area is and being able to frame things in a way that are accessible to lots of different people. And so those kinds of things, any of you guys could do those types of things. So I think it's also about having the confidence that like you can actually do something else, even if it's not in your comfort zone or something that you've done a lot before.
Totally. So then thinking about that, it sounds like a lot of the work you're doing is obviously creating content for deliverables, working directly with sites, doing the actual research. And so given all of that, we know typically how success is maybe measured in a tenure track position, right? With publications, service hours, number of students you're mentoring, traditional markers or metrics of success. Kind of how is success measured at a place like AIR?
So we don't write peer-reviewed publications.
Sure.
Some people do. And if you are creating a budget for your project, you can sometimes add that in as something that you want to, build in time for yourself to create a publication. Sure. And some there are some people at AIR who do publish in peer-reviewed journals, but it's not a requirement of the job. And I would say most people don't do it. They focus on whatever the deliverables are for that particular project. And so I would say success is really measured by how you work on a team with other people, whether or not projects get completed with quality. And so there's project reviews that we have where we meet with leadership over the course of the project to see how things are going. You have someone on the project who is managing the budget and seeing how, you are spending the money that you get for the project. And so like those things are all important. So like, are you getting things done on time? Are you working well with the other people on your team? Is the work that you're producing good? All of those things I think are really important. And then as you kind of move up in the organization, so we have people who as low as bachelor's degrees at places like AIR. So you have research assistants, you have bachelor's degrees, you have research associates, you have masters, and then you have kind of mid-level and up, which have masters or PhDs. And as you move up in the organization, it's much more important how much money you bring into the organization. So in a similar way to academia, where you have to get grants and like that's part of success, that's like part of the success at AIR as well. And it's not that you have to, like, if you don't win money, like you get fired. You don't have to like fund yourself to continue to work at AIR, but they do look at how much are you working on proposals, because we have proposal teams. So you have a proposal lead and then you have writers and like other people on the team. So are you working on proposal teams? Are you leading proposals? And that's kind of like where I am in the organization. And then in order to move up, it's like, how much money are you winning? How many grants are you winning? How much are you working with clients to figure out, what their needs are and going after money and winning it? And so that is definitely a part of the organization as well that I didn't really know about till I got here.
So that kind of brought me to my question about the grant-based process, right? So this is what you're describing for folks here is what we term like soft money fields, right? That
it's all soft money.
That soft money fields are, when we say like we're going to go work for a soft money place, that it is a place like this that is running after grants. But I think, Jameela, you said something that's really important, that getting grants doesn't necessarily mean you lose your job, right? So that there is I imagine, and correct me if the structure is different here, there is a general fund that is paying people's salaries, in which grant money does go into the general fund, and it goes into actually producing the work and doing the work, right? And that you are paid out of a general fund, right? So if you happen to get caught between two grants or something, you're not going to lose your job because you're on a very specific grant, right? You work for AIR, you don't work for the grant. But that obviously your ultimate overall success is contingent upon the fact that you are part of teams that are constantly bringing in money to constantly fund the general fund that helps pay for everyone's salaries. Does that sound about fair?
Yes, I think there's a couple of clarifications that I will make to that. I think that general idea goes well
Sure.
and is how things work. But this kind of goes back to why you're on multiple projects, which I mentioned before. Because if you're only on one project, first of all, that project's going to end at some point. There's no project that is indefinite. They're all somewhere between 6 months and 6 years. Sometimes there's projects that are really long, but that's rare. We have a lot of projects that are like 5-year projects. And if you're only on that one project, when that project ends, then you have to figure out, like, what am I doing with my time? And how am I going to get on other projects? And so one of the reasons why people are on multiple projects and you split your time is that if one project ends, or, you lose a project or something, then it's not as hard to like figure out what to do and like cover that time.
Sure.
And it's also, not like you won't necessarily just like get fired. If you were only on one project and then you lose that project and can't figure out what else to get on, there's probably a time period in which they'll try to see if you can get on another project, but then eventually, like, there's no spot for you if you're not working.
Well, and to that point, then, are you having to advocate for yourself to move projects, or is there kind of a flow to how that works also?
So there's always work, always. So it's advocating in that you want to have a say in what projects you're on. And we have a lot of choice. So you get to decide, do I want to be on this juvenile justice project? Do I want to be on this education project? Like, you get to make those kinds of decisions. Do I want to be a quant person or a qualitative person, or do I want to do more training projects or more research projects? So there's a lot of choice and a lot of autonomy in terms of what kinds of projects that you're on. And so you advocate for yourself because you want to, be on projects that you want to be on.
That's right.
If you didn't care about what projects you were on and you were just like agnostic and you're like, I'll be on any project. I don't know anybody who's like that, but let's say you were there, you can get on any project. Sure. I mean, there's like calls all the time that say we need this level person with this expertise on this project. So there's that situation is happening all of the time. So there's always projects that you can get on. But then the question is, do you want to be on that project? And because our organization is so big, we have like 1,500 employees.
Sure.
Maybe there's someone you don't want to work with.
Sure.
And you don't have to, because the organization is so big. So yeah.
Well, it sounds like you'd really have to be out in la la land, like in the clouds, just really aloof, to find yourself stuck between two projects or stuck with no project to be on. That there's always ample opportunity for you to be on multiple projects at once. So that way you're never having to argue that, you always have the ability to say how you're providing value to a specific project and to AIR as a whole.
Sure.
So then thinking about that, we've kind of talked a little bit about like general skills, right? That even though you're not coming from a traditional CJ background, that there are some skills that transcend space, right? This idea
Absolutely.
of, you said being able to work with sites and talking them through like what they need and what they want, developing research questions with them based upon their bottom line, thinking through what it means to present research in a way that's digestible for a lay audience, thinking about what that looks like in multiple forms, right? So vlogging, blogging, technical reports or otherwise, like one pagers of sorts, all of those things are not dependent on your content expertise, right?
No,
That they transcend.
and their methods, your methods experience as well, like your quant skills, your qualitative skills, like all of those things.
That's right. And so then, when we're thinking about that, when you think about the people at your organization, including yourself, that do really well, what do those people look like? Do they have those skills walking in the door, or, who are the people that are just absolutely excelling in a place like AIR?
I don't think they all walked in the door with those skills.
Okay.
I think it's, like I said, like, I think it's hard to get those skills unless you work at a place like AIR. Or, we do have people who have backgrounds as teachers and backgrounds as practitioners, that I think are less like they weren't trained as academic researchers, or they were, and then they had another kind of job.
Sure.
But I don't think, it's not necessary to come in with those kinds of skills. We have a lot of people who came straight out of academia, a lot of people who came from a postdoc. I think what they look for at AIR are people who have good research skills, because we do a lot of research and we have to write up those research plans in order to get the money.
Sure.
To do the work. So having the research skills is really important. I think having a knowledge of the importance of communicating to other audiences, even if you haven't done it,
Sure.
but feeling like that's important and wanting to have those skills, I think is probably more important than actually having those skills
Okay.
coming in, because I think people won't do well if they come in and are like against what we do, against, they're like, all they want to do is like write peer-reviewed journal articles and do their own research, and that we don't do those things here. And so having an interest in those types of things are really important. Less important, or more important than actually having those skills coming in the door. And I also think that we need all kinds of people at AIR. So we need people with content expertise. We need people with a specific methods expertise. We have people at AIR who do a lot of RCTs, and like that's their thing, and that's what they want to be their thing. And so they work across a lot of content areas, developing RCTs and running them. And so we have people who are purely methods people. We have people who are much more content people who don't on their project, and then they staff the methods people on their projects. And so we need all kinds of people at AIR. And so it's not necessary that you have to like know everything and do everything, but you just have to have something that you enjoy or want to do. And there will definitely be a space.
That was one of the things I was thinking as you were talking, is it a place like someone like you who can really is very flexible and fluid about how you're able to apply your content information and like where you're able to do that. So if people were more generalists, or almost like a version of a statistician or a methodologist specifically, and it sounds like it's all of those people.
It's all of those things.
Yeah. So then thinking about quickly, and I know we're running out of time. So if folks have questions, please feel free to chat, unmute yourself, interrupt me. My kind of last big question is thinking about coming to work at a place like AIR, kind of what does the application process look like kind of from start to finish? It's fast, it's slow, it takes forever. There's a job talk, there's not a job talk. Like, what does it look like?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So I don't think it's slow. I wouldn't say it's slow, but I also wouldn't say it's particularly fast either.
Sure.
I mean, I guess it depends on what your definition of fast and slow are. But generally, you have an intro call with a hiring manager.
Mhm.
So they're calling just to like kind of go over your expertise, your background, make sure that you're like kind of qualified for the job. It's a pretty easy, like it's like a screening. It's like a
Sure.
screening call. Then you have a more in-depth phone call that's like more about your background and what it is that you're looking for and to see if you might be a good fit. And then you have a job talk and an interview. So that is pretty similar to, I believe, what you would do for a faculty position as well. As you come in for a job talk and have interviews with people. They will ask you to present on some sort of research project. And then they will ask questions and you may meet with a couple of people. The kinds of questions may be different. So I got asked questions like, how would you communicate this for educators?
Mhm.
And what do you like working in teams? What is that like for you? And what about, how do you feel about like getting your writing edited and like having multiple rounds of review for things? So like those were the type of questions that I got. And I will say not at AIR, but often at other non-academic places, they may ask you to do some sort of task. So that's pretty common in other places, is for them to say, we want you to analyze some data, or we want you to look at this and come up with some recommendations or something like that. And so we don't do that at AIR, but I have heard that some of the research organizations are asking for folks to do some sort of specific task as a part of their application process.
That's right. At JSP, we have for some of the researchers that we're bringing in, we give them a data set and have them look at it. And that's not to say that it's overwhelming. It's not. You get the code book. It's usually already a clean data set. We're not looking to see if you can clean the data. It's mostly just about like, can you run a couple of things? Can you consider, can you talk about it, right? Like in a lay conversation is really the bottom line, less about the math behind it. Just, can you have a conversation about this? Yeah. So is there, if we have any questions from students, please feel free to pipe in here. But, now that you've been at AIR for like 3.5 years or so, is there something that you wish you would have known walking through it, or even prior to the policy fellowship that you did at NIJ? Like, is there something that you wish as a student you would have known that you know now, or that you could tell your younger self?
Yeah, I think that the thing that was the most helpful to me when I was a fellow was talking to people in different career positions, and they really encouraged us as a fellow to do that. And I wish I had started doing it as a graduate student. Is go to conferences, or just Google, find out organizations that do something different, and then talk to those people and see what their job is like, just to learn what else is out there. And so I think that was really helpful for me. And it helps you get jobs when you have a connection to that organization as well. I did see a question in the chat box.
Yep. So do you feel as though, now that you've been doing it for a while, do you ever feel like you wish you would have gone in a traditional academic route?
I don't think so. I don't feel like I ever have, regretted not doing it. I also think that these organizations, depending on what university you're at, can sometimes pay more than faculty positions. And so, it may have to take a pay cut to go to a university.
That's right.
And I think I also feel like things can get busy here, but I have a much more of a work-life balance than I saw my faculty members have.
Mhm.
And so I think that also makes me like this a little bit more.
Well, and I think, one of our prior rock stars that came and chatted with us, who works at a consulting firm, so he was at Deloitte for a while and now at Reuters. He also adjuncts, right, on the side. So that's not to say, and you're at AIR is in Georgetown and in DC, right? So
Yeah.
that's not to say that if you didn't want to do those things, you couldn't, right? Like these pathways are far less mutually exclusive than we give them credit for.
Yeah. I'm teaching a graduate class right now at George Mason. So you definitely can.
So
I work at an agency and I'm adjunct faculty as well.
So I think that I don't know that we talk about that as much, right? That, there are other ways that you can still be in these traditional university spaces that don't look like traditional faculty tenure track jobs, but you're still teaching, you're still engaging in a way that maybe feels more theoretically grounded, and far more traditional.
And there's, it's not similar, it's not the same kind of mentoring as at a university, but I certainly oversee research assistants and research associates and have conversations with them about, how to do things. And, we also have a formal kind of mentoring program at AIR where everybody has, we call them their staff manager, but everybody has that person, and it's like a mentoring kind of position that you would have at university. So, there are similarities.
Absolutely. I think it's common for people to have also worked at places like AIR and soft money fields for a long time, and then 20 years later, 10 years, like go back and do a traditional faculty position. I certainly know that exists at George Mason, if not for anything else, but because of its close proximity to these types of alternative academic spaces that exist.
Absolutely.
Well, Jameela, I know that we are now at the top of the hour, and so I want to be grateful and thoughtful of your time. And if there aren't any other student questions, I just want to, of course, thank you again for joining us. It's been so nice to see your smiling face. It's been a few years since I've seen it. And, I think we've had these conversations before where we think it's important that students understand the alternatives that exist for them and what they look like. So students have questions for what it's like to work in a nonprofit research area like AIR. Dr. Conway-Turner said that she's more than willing to have her contact information shared and chat with you. And so we just really appreciate you being so gracious with your time.
No problem. I'm glad to be here.
All right. Well, with that, we thank you all so much for joining us, and we hope you have a good rest of your Tuesday.
Bye.